So today for the Academy of the Sweet Beats, I'm interviewing Philly legend Byron Landham, who's been a jazz institution in the area. Great guy, great player. This is going to be a good one.
This is one of the very first symbols I got from Bosch's.
But just tell me how you got started and stuff.
Well, I guess I have a brother that's a musician. His name's Byron Landham, and I guess I started playing drum. I developed an interest in music when I was about 5 years old. My brother was already playing classical clarinet at the time, and so I got into drumming. I started hearing these drums. I went to a party when I was young. I went to like a block party. They don't have them anymore. That was the 70s.
Yeah.
But I went to this block party and I got fixated watching this drummer play. And then I started hitting everything in the house, and then my mother got me some drums. So I guess when I was about 7 years old, I started.
Okay. And did you start taking lessons, or were you just...
No, I played pretty much primarily by ear. Like what I did was I sat down and I would play with records. So I would just listen to whatever was popping, Stevie Wonder,
Nice.
stuff like the Gladys Knight and the Pips.
Nice.
You know. So I started out pretty much with that R&B background, and that was exciting for me.
So who were some of the drummers that you first got into?
I guess when I first started, like the drummers that I was really influenced by when I started to really take notice of guys' names and things like that was probably Max Roach and Art Blinky, because my brother started playing saxophone and started playing jazz in particular. And that was pretty much like the record collection that we had. It was a lot of jazz stuff that he was interested in. And I started to listen to that like, oh, this allows you to be a little bit more of an individual. You can apply different things as opposed to just playing a groove.
Right.
So I started really paying attention to those guys, like how they would play with an ensemble. But I was also into Steve Gadd and Harvey Mason and anybody you can think of like that.
Nice. So when did you start formal training,
I started to study,
how old were you?
I was 11, I think, when I started to study formally. I went to Settlement Music School in Germantown. I studied with a guy named Ray Brucknell as my teacher. And I studied there for about 4 years. So it was called Better Break Music Camp, and I was involved with that as well as, Ray had percussion ensembles, and he had a bunch of different things he had me playing a little bit of mallets as well, and marimba and things like that.
You were reading music, you were sight reading?
I was sight reading. That's what I went to study for, pretty much, was to learn how to read, because I had a really good ear. I mean, my ear was pretty developed for somebody my age at that time. So it was like I need to learn how to read. I read okay now.
The gigs you're doing currently, do you do much sight reading, or?
No.
No.
Thank God.
Yeah.
Thank God. It's still, for me, I read fairly well. Sight reading is not really one of my strong suits, especially if it's like really difficult music. That's if you're having all these metric modulations and things like that. It's kind of different. I develop this anxiety when I read, but I read well. And a chart is just a blueprint. I like to take that. I like to internalize it too. Once I internalize the music, I can apply myself to it.
So, what was the first gig? You started pretty young. I started late. I started when I was like 18.
Mm-hmm.
What was like the first gig you did where it was like, wow, this is like, start making a little money at this and start getting a little notoriety, start playing with some name players?
I was like 16. When I was 16, I started getting a lot of calls. I think I did a gig with my brother at the Painted Bride. And a lot of people, so I think Bootsy Barnes was there, and Monette Settler, all these different people were there, and a lot of people were talking to me, so I started to work with Monette Settler. I started to work with Charles Fambro. I started working with Bootsy Barnes, with Sid Simmons, and everything just started opening up. I was like, wow. And it was like I was working, and I was happy. It wasn't so much even about the money, but I was like, wow, this is turning into something for me. I could see it growing at the time, This was, I would say maybe 1985?
Okay.
85 or 86. And I started to work. That's when I started getting a lot of professional gigs. I was like 16 and 17. I started working in a lot of the clubs and the scene and just around town. I started getting some gigs. Some calls would go up to New Hope and Newtown to play, and it was like an exciting time.
Mostly jazz gigs?
Mostly jazz gigs. Well, at that time, you know what? You had to play everything.
Yeah.
There was no, I'm a rock drummer, I'm a jazz drummer, I'm a funk drummer. We played everything. We played R&B, we played top 40 stuff, we played straight ahead, we played Latin stuff. And that's how music should be, in my opinion.
Absolutely, yeah. Were there a lot more places to play for jazz at that time than now?
It certainly seems to be. Actually, around that time, you had a few clubs up here. In this area, you had LG's Blue Note, you had Lakey's, you had Slim Cooper's. So that was 3 places that were up here, and it's like literally none now.
Yeah.
And you had all the other ones. You had Ortleaves, you still had TNT Monroe's and places like that downtown. I think it was a lot more places in the city to play. And they weren't just like concentrated in one area.
Yeah.
Like it seems to be now, you know. It's like,
I first heard you at Ortleaves.
Mhm.
You were always playing there.
Yeah.
You were like the house.
well, I was like, you know, I started to work at Ortleaves. That whole thing came about when I was like 17 or 18. Me and Fareed Barron were working there a lot because Fareed was, you know, he's a pianist. You know Fareed Barron? He's a really good pianist. Works with Sunrise Orchestra. He was living above Ortleaves at that time. I think he was like 18 or something. And he was living there, and him and I were like, I came down and I would fill in for Bobby Durham or Mickey Rover because they were young, they were on the road a lot.
Yeah.
So I would be there doing a lot of the weekends for them. And then that turned into, Pete decided he was going to change the band. On Tuesday nights they had a jam session. And he decided he was going to change the group that he had. I think for years he had a group with Jim Halton, Bill Schilling, and Billy James. He's another great drummer. And then he changed it to me, Mike Boone, and Sid Simmons. So then it was like, that was this long thing. I think we did that for maybe 15 years. I didn't realize how fast the time went by. And every first of the month, I was there every night. Because I would play Tuesday, do the jam session. Wednesday, I would be with Bootsy. Thursday, I would play with Pete. And then Friday and Saturday, it would be the big sextet playing. You know, the smoking sextet it was called. With John Swana. He was a really good band. So that was, Ortleaves was kind of like, I guess you can say that's my honing ground for honing my skills. I was at Ortleaves all the time, pretty much.
Yeah.
I was always working there. And to me, Ortleaves was an institution, you know, because you had people like Shirley Scott, you had Arthur Harper, you know, you go there, you learn. It's like, and it wasn't like now. There's nothing wrong with the way kids are learning now, but I think with all the institutionalized stuff, all the universities and things like that, I think that we've gotten away from just handing things down generation to generation. Look, do this, don't do that.
Absolutely.
You know, that's what the music's missing.
Do you run into that with your teaching, with your students?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Well, actually, you know what? A lot of these kids look at me as I'm kind of like the disciple of that. I'm like the last one, the link between young and old.
Yeah.
I hate to say that, but it appears to be that way. A lot of them look at me like, "Oh, you're an old head." It's like, no, I'm not really an old head.
Well, that's a good thing. Like I'm the
That's
same
great.
way.
Yeah, that's
like,
great. It's a great thing.
Yeah.
And you know, that's what I like to do. I always give advice. I always talk about things, about what I feel is important. Be it from a drum point of view, you gotta have a good time. You should play good time. And then if you're talking about playing any music where you're improvising, it's about playing fundamentally sound and about letting the music dictate to you and not trying to force everything down everybody's throat.
Well said.
Just, you know what I mean? It's a conversation.
Absolutely.
It's a conversation.
Absolutely. Do you run into, with teaching students, a student may come in, a kid generally, and they want to learn a song, but that they almost want to skip all the fundamentals just to get to the song.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's like it doesn't work that
Well,
way.
a lot of them doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
You gotta crawl before you can walk.
Right.
You know. And I tell them all the time, man. Here's the Byron Landham mantras. Remember this. Never give too much too soon. And it's not what you're playing; it's how you play what you play.
Yeah.
It's not the notes. You know, I've seen it happen a million times. Like I used to work with Betty Carter. I'll tell you a story. I was working in New York City at the Blue Note, and you know, it was a nice set. It was burning, and then Idris Muhammad comes and sits in.
Wow.
And it's like, and she played the song, and the tempo was so fast, and he was playing so light and so pretty. And he took the solo, and I'm thinking, okay, he's gonna play all this. It was the simplest stuff that he was playing, man. It was just like, and I was listening. It was like knocking me out because his solo was just opening up like a flower blooming.
Yeah.
And that's how it should be. It's like you got to be able to communicate on a very simplistic basis. You got to be able to start here to get there.
Right.
If you start here, you got to know where to go.
Right.
And it's like, so what? What does it matter? You know.
I work on that too, like working on solos and stuff, and just giving the crowd, one part of your solo might be just rhythm, like
Yeah.
it won't be chops.
The best solos are the memorable ones.
Yeah.
When you can, and I don't mean that from. And don't get me wrong, I'm just as wild as the next guy when somebody's got a lot of chops. I love to see that too, but
Sure.
to me it's still about communication, and your average music listener is not a musician, not a drummer, so it's like, I have to tell you another story in a minute about that.
Yeah.
The audience doesn't know whether you're playing triple paradiddles or flams. They want to be moved spiritually.
Right.
I did a gig, I was working with Betty Carter again. I was in, it was like the opening night of a European tour. And I remember this, I was in the south of Germany. We were and we were playing at a place called William Schwenning. And then we played this old cathedral, man. It was like huge. It was a beautiful place. And there had to be like 3,000 people in there, and it was like jammed. And so she was like, oh, go ahead, play something. And I was playing, and I just paused for a minute. I had to look up, man. I could see all these people, man. They had their eyes closed, and they had their ears turned up. It scared me because I said, they're actually listening to me. They don't care. Doesn't matter if I play a whole lot of flashy stuff because it's not going to mean anything at the end of the day.
Right.
They want to hear the struggle and the communication. They want you to reach out to them, and that can be, it could be through dynamics. It could be by flash. It could be, with a couple notes. It could just be just expression, And that's what people really want, and that's what I try to teach. And you can't really teach that to young guys because I think it's an experience that you have to go through in life to understand. Like the more important things are the more subtle things. Betty used to say to me, "You want to know how good? You want to know if you sound good? Look at the women in the audience. If you see them grooving, you sound all right."
That's
I go to these gigs now, and there's a bunch of college kids standing in the corner because they're trying to, I got to get this to get that.
Yeah, they're on their cell phone.
And it's, it's not about that all the time. I said, you have to be a lover of music. Be a lover of the music first. And sometimes if they see me play, I might play really busy and play a lot of stuff, and they'll get a misunderstanding of what it's about. Some tunes will require that you play a lot, that you play really busy and expressive. Some tunes you just got to sit in the pocket and play nothing.
Yeah.
But you better be able to do both, sufficiently.
Wear both hats, yeah. I know what you're saying when you were talking about Germany. When I played in Belgium, the crowd was like, there was no cell phones.
Yeah.
The sports bar, looking at the TV. They came to see you play.
They came to see you play, yep.
Yeah. Their eyes are on you and they're listening to you. It's like
that can be a very frightening thing when you're used to playing like loud bars in America, playing your just background music.
Right.
You get so used to that, and it's like when you really have somebody's attention, it's like, wow, be careful what you wish for,
Yeah. So true. So tell me more about playing with Betty Carter.
I started to work with Betty, and I guess I was pretty much already established because I worked with Joey DiFrancesco for 20 years. I started with him in I guess in 88 or 89. I think I was 19 when I started with him. I worked with him for about maybe 10 years already. And I got a call from Betty, and it was like, I think it was another one of those hangover nights too. It was like, I had played at Ortlieb's. I played at Ortlieb's. It was a Friday night, and then I was asleep the next day. My phone's ringing at like 8 o'clock in the morning, and I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
And it's like, Byron? And I'm like, yes. This is Betty Carter. I said, oh, how you doing, Betty? He says, so when can I hear you play? I said, whenever you want. Well, can you come up tomorrow? I said, wow, okay, I'll be there tomorrow. And I went to a series of rehearsals with her, me and different drummers. Like she had a couple other guys there. Greg Hutchinson was there. He had already worked with her, but it was kind of like me and Greg were pretty tight. And she ended up hiring me. It was like that was in '95, like the November of '95 that she hired me. And I didn't work with her for a really long. I worked with her till about to January of '97 is when I left. I mean, it was really busy, and it was music. It was on a high level. But it was also, working with her kind of teaches you a little bit more about the things in life and dealing with adversity and stuff on the road. Because, you know, not everybody, working with Joey was cool because him and I are like brothers, so it was like, you know, but it's not like working with somebody that, you know, they may be on your ass or giving you a difficult time, you know.
Right.
She's kind of like that, and sometimes it was necessary, and sometimes it was unnecessary.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's just her personality, but I think that's what working with somebody that teaches you lessons about life. Music is life.
Yeah.
So however you deal with people, and you still have to perform every night and sound good, sound consistent. That really makes you who you are. That shapes everything to me. And I remember it's just so many things that she would, you know. I remember her. She would, when I first started working with her, it was cool because it was, you know, she was being really, really nice to me. And I was like telling the guys, like, man, she's like paying, you know, buying my train, because I was going back and forth to New York, but she's giving me money and stuff. They're like, oh, it'll change, you know, you just wait. And then I came into rehearsal one day. This was like maybe after like a month or so of working with her. And it was a completely different band. I'm like, oh, well, what happened to so-and-so? And she says, oh, don't worry about that. Just worry about yourself. Oh, okay. And it was like, you know, it's like, you don't want to be a mediocre drummer, do you? It's like, you know, those kind of things. Like, okay. You're not playing a hi-hat on 2 and 4 when you solo. And you know why you're not doing it, don't you? I said, no, why am I? Because you're lost. Just admit it.
Wow.
Like, that's the first step to recovery. Yeah. You know, those kinds of things like, yeah. Oh, okay. You know, and she's like, man, why did it take you so long to tune the drums? You know, you got to learn how to, like these little things is like, that made me stronger. She's like, I'm saying all this stuff to you. You don't understand it now, but you will 10 years later. And she was right. She was right about that. You got to be able to go from a whisper to a roar. You know, and she would do that. At times you'd be playing really fast, go fast and strong, and then the next time you got to play a ballad, and you got to reach for the brushes, and your hands are shaking, like, you know.
I know that feeling. Yeah.
It's tough, man.
Yeah.
But that's good. It's good for you. You know what they say. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Yeah. It makes you more focused. You know.
Absolutely. Yeah. So tell us about Joey DeFrancesco. Tell about your experience with him.
I met Joey. Joey was actually, well, you know, he's been a prodigy. He was a child prodigy playing. You know, he had this uncanny knack of playing the blues, which you don't see a lot. You know. Yeah. And I don't care whether you're white, black, where you come from. Not everybody can play the blues. You either have it or you don't. You can either swing or you cannot. But he had this really, he was fascinating. He was like this little fat kid that could play the blues. It was like unbelievable. And he was working in a band called Mail Order with my brother, with a great drummer, one of my mentors, a guy named Kevin Outerbridge, with Lewis Taylor, a great saxophone player, a guitarist named Kelvin Nathaniel. But anyway, yeah, it was. And I saw Joey, and I guess I'm like a year and a half older than Joey. So he was 10 at the time playing. And this was part of that music camp that I mentioned to you earlier, Better Brick Music Camp. Yeah. And he was so advanced, so he was playing with guys that were, you know, my brother's like six years older than me. So all these guys were like, you know, 15, 16, 17, 18 years old, and he was 10 playing with them. 10? He was 10 years old playing with them. I started doing, like, we were getting these little gigs. I did a couple of little gigs for the city, like things in front of, downtown in front of Mellon Bank and stuff like that. And him and I did one together one time, just the two of us playing. And I think that started some kind of association. And then, but I guess by the time Joey was 17, you know, he played with Miles Davis, working with Miles Davis for half a year or whatever, and Columbia Records signed him. So it was like, wow. And then when he started his band, my brother was in his band. It was me. He was using, I think he was using Jimmy Smith Jr., the drummer. And he had asked my brother about me. He says, your brother's still playing? He's like, yeah, brother's still playing. He says, you think he would want to race? He says, yeah, call him, you know. So he called me, and that became a band. It was Joey, me, my brother Robert Landham, and the guitarist Jeff Lee Johnson, who's a great guitarist, passed a little while ago. And Joey ended up changing his band. Like all the horn players were gone after a while. The band started as a quartet, then it went to a quintet, then it was a sextet, and then it ended up being a trio. And I guess I've been with him the longest. I've been with him for like 21 years or 22 years we were a band. And me, him, and a great guitarist, a great guitar player named Paul Ballenbach. I think we had a really long run together for maybe. Paul's been around with that band for maybe about 19 years. We've been everywhere together. We've spent a lot of time, done a lot of things together. We truly love the guy. Truly love. A lot of people think I still work with him, but I don't.
Yeah.
It's been 2 years now. I've been out of his band for 2 years.
Okay.
But yeah, it's been a great association. Him and I, we played together with countless people because him and I had such a thing together, such a rapport that, you know, we've had like Bobby Hutchinson's worked with us, and George Coleman's worked with us, and everybody, Illinois Chiquette, Kirk Whalum,
Wow.
Grover Washington Jr.
Wow.
We recorded. Yeah, we've done so much stuff
Yeah.
together. It's Dave Sanborn, you know.
Yeah.
That band's a trio. Me, him, and Joey, just sax, drums, and organ.
Tell us about experience playing with David Sanborn.
Well, Dave, I got recommended to Dave's band through Joey because they did a record, I guess in 2010, just a few years back. They did a record in the summer, a trio with him and Steve Gadd and Dave. So they were out traveling for, I guess they were promoting that trio record that they did. And Steve, you know, of course, Steve got busy after a while, so he couldn't do it. Steve's out with everybody, making mega millions. So Gene Lake was primarily Dave's drummer, I guess, for his electric group with Ricky Peterson and all these great musicians. And I think that Joey had recommended me because this kind of group had a lot of like the music was kind of like a lot of like Ray Charles style stuff from the 50s, a lot of shuffle stuff, a lot of 12/8 backbeats.
Nice.
Some straight ahead stuff and some of his funk stuff from the 80s as well.
Mm.
Dave had me come by, he wanted to play. So I think I did a gig, me and Joey did a gig, and Paul, we did a gig in Connecticut. And him and I went by Dave's after that gig. And I went up, Dave's had a studio upstairs, and we did some playing, and he's like, man, well, you're in. So I was like, oh, okay, wow. And Dave, you know, Dave was really a great musician and really a sweet guy. He's a really a nice guy. Dave plays strong. That's what I learned from him. Is like just to be consistently strong. You know, you look at this man. He's had you know, he's got post-polio syndrome. There was no vaccination, so he's got polio. He's got a real like weak arm and a real weak leg. And Dave's about 90 pounds soaking wet.
Wow.
You know, he's a really small guy. Then when he puts that horn in his mouth, it's ridiculous. He'll blow you away.
Yeah.
It's like powerful, and it's like, man, you gotta play. When I started working with him, man, I was playing so hard, my hands were hurting.
Yeah.
I'd start wearing braces. I said, oh, I gotta learn how to play the way I play, because I don't play hard, I don't play loud.
Right.
I play,
Notice that.
I play strong, but I don't like to bash too much.
Yeah.
I was playing so hard because I could barely hear myself, man. It was like he was so powerful, and he would have monitors in front of him that would blow me away. I was like, oh.
Yeah.
There was just so much energy.
Yeah.
And I just, I made a nice quite a few runs with Dave, like over the next, let me see, from 2010, we did a summer tour.
Mm-hmm.
And then I did stuff with him in 2011, as well as in 12. And as recent as last September was the last time I worked with Dave.
Okay.
But I just talked to him recently because I did a record just in January. I did a record in January with Chuck Loeb, the guitarist, and I met him on one of Dave's gigs. We were in Detroit playing, and I think Chuck sat in with us, and Chuck called me, and he was doing a record with Eric Marienthal and John Patitucci. So he says, man, I want you to do this. And it turns out that Dave just moved from out of New York City, and now he lives in a place called Irvington, New York, which is where Chuck lives, which is like right next to the Tappan Zee River, the Tappan Zee Bridge. Mm-hmm. So that's the last time I talked to Dave was in January.
So you said the magic word a couple of minutes ago, the shuffle. Which to me is the meat and potatoes of drums.
The shuffle is the meat and potatoes, and there's plenty of different versions of shuffles, and a lot of guys play them a different way. A real shuffle, and let me see. I like to say, who played the real shuffle was Art Blakey.
Oh yeah.
That's a real shuffle.
Hypnotic.
A shuffle is like this. That's a shuffle. The Art Blakey real shuffle. If you go watch B.B. King, they shuffle all night, and that's what you're going to hear at various tempos.
Yeah. So Art Blakey's pretty much it was the first guy that got you into.
Art Blakey's thing for me, what I really learned from him was how to play with a band, how to play with an ensemble, and that was his thing. I think he really Art Blakey didn't read music or nothing like that, but he really knew how to. Would have all these young musicians, always like young, inspiring guys, and they would write music and stuff for the band, and he always played their music like he wrote it, because he knew how to color music, you know. And his thing, his signature was that's Art Blakey from It's just his control. And just the drive of that groove. It's always.
Yours ain't bad either. Let's get into the buzz roll there too.
Well,
let's talk about that, please.
Well, I guess the buzz roll is a product of like New Orleans. You talk about people like Baby Dodds. I don't use a whole lot of buzz rolls in my playing. I like rolls when they sound more open.
Mm-hmm.
But the buzz roll, I guess if you think about like the New Orleans, the ragtime music, if you think. About just applying pressure, and I think it sounds better when you're closer to the edge of the drum, which is kind of like goes against what I teach people. I always teach people play in the center of the drum, so you get, because you're going to hear everything, it's going to articulate so much better. But also, playing drums is not so much about your articulation all the time or your accurateness. It's about the sound that you get. So whether you're playing stand or rim, anything, it's all about the sound that you get, and it doesn't always have to be, there is no such thing as a perfect sound or an imperfect sound. So the buzz, and buzz, they just say buzz because basically they say buzz or press roll. So you're basically pressing into the drum, as you know. I think the faster that you do it, or as it gets louder, your motion should slow down some. Your motion should slow down because you get more power when you're pulling from the sides of the drum.
Now tell us about when you learn your buzz roll, because it's a lot to learn. Your buzz roll is like your dynamics are incredible.
Well, I think that like the roll is probably like the first. I think that, and you would being a drummer, I'll say this. I think that's probably the thing that fascinates us as drummers more than anything, is when you learn how to do a roll. Like for me, I guess a buzz roll is probably, and me playing jazz a lot is probably really important because. That's pretty much the best fill that you're ever going to play. You can do all kinds of other things, but the roll is perfect because it takes up. You can use a roll. I think Bill Bruford had a thing called "When in Doubt, Roll." You can always fill in space with a roll, and a roll is always, in most cases, it's going to be done perfectly. It's not so, once you feel it and learn how to do it, it's easier. It's one of the easier things that you don't have to use so much concentration. To come up with all these weirdies, just pretty much just feel it and go with it. Mm-hmm. Yes, I mean, I guess probably the first thing I learned was probably the press roll, because it was like about multiple rebounds, and you don't have to really worry about that so much because you just basically let the stick do its work for you. That, and then you have the open roll as well, which is probably mine's a little sloppy right now. I prefer the sound of the open roll more than the press roll. because I like to hear all the notes, and I like to hear the space between the notes. And the last roll I probably learned was, the most difficult one was the single stroke roll, which is a really difficult roll to do because you have to be ultimately relaxed. And a lot of people tell me, oh, you look really relaxed when you play, and you look really relaxed. Well, I think that's the key. It's about relaxing and trying to breathe, you know. It's like, I'll tell you a story about that too. A really great drummer friend of mine named Mel Brown from out in the Portland area, he says he took a lesson from Papa Joe Jones. And he says he was like 17 years old. And he said what he really remembered was, the first thing he got there, and Papa Joe Jones was drinking like a half a gallon of cognac. And he was like sitting back on the seat, like doing roll with the bass drum pretty much, like rolling with the bass, like whoa.
Wow.
And he's drinking like he's doing, he said, you gotta be able to control. He says, so he's doing this roll on the bass drum, and it's way up here, and dynamics in it comes way down, and he's still holding it. Then he tells Mel, he says, let me hear you play something. And Mel goes to play something, and he says, Papa Joe just looked at him. And Papa Joe did this, he says, and Mel, then Papa Joe said, you have to breathe. If you don't breathe, you ain't gonna have no circulation in your body. You have to be able to breathe. And here's the thing, with drummers, technically we don't have to breathe, but you should. Like when you're improvising, if you're playing ideas, what you don't play is more important than what you do play. If you play, that's cool, but if you, it's the syncopation and the space that really makes it what it is.
Yeah. That's what I love about like a Count Basie record. The
Wow.
space, like Sonny Payne. is one of
Wow.
my favorites. Like,
Wow.
Right?
Yeah, some
Yeah.
things are absolutely outrageous because that's the best of both worlds. There, you got somebody that can do all this phenomenal stuff, but can just sit there and groove you to death.
Yeah.
And play the simplest things, and it'd be like highly musical. It's like music on another level, and then the passion that he had just playing, you know. Those are the people. That's what I emulate from a lot of artists. Like the great artists, I always just try to understand what they're thinking or their attitude about what they're doing.
Yeah.
Because that's what makes you great. It's like it doesn't matter the notes you play; it's how you play those notes.
Absolutely.
And and people say it'll take you a long time to sound like yourself, which is true. It does take you a long time, and we do have to imitate people. I think to be able to find yourself, you have to imitate people. But the more important thing to imitate, I believe, is to try to imitate their style or their feeling, what they were feeling. You try to think about how they felt when they were doing a certain thing. And that can vary from song to song, not just their style in general, but just when you hear him play one piece of music, it was like, wow, sounds like he had this vibe or this certain kind of attitude with the music. That's what I'm always searching for, and I tell guys about that all the time. Search for, somebody's their spirituality, what they're feeling.
It's like when you hear Steve Jordan play like a
straight up,
man,
right?
It's ridiculous.
Like he'll just play like a straight 2 and 4.
And it would be the most killingest thing.
But yeah, it just sings. You know, someone else will play the same thing, but it just doesn't have the same.
It's his conviction, and he's so seriously, that feeling he's got. It's unbelievable. You're right. It could be the simplest beat.
Yeah.
The simplest thing.
And
that's somebody great. Those people like that can really say a lot to you with a little bit. That's a great artist. That's the difference between a good artist and a great artist.
yeah,
It's about that.
totally. So you want to talk a little about, you touched on Art Blakey a little bit, Max Roach and Kenny Clark, and kind of what you
those three, yeah, it's like I was influenced by them most because that's kind of like where I started. When I started to really study jazz, those guys were like the ensemble players, and that's my brother's a horn player, so it's like everything I heard, it was like Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers, or Clifford Brown and Max Roach, or like an old Dizzy record, or something like that. It was like, and it was used probably one of those three drummers playing, and the three of those guys, they always played for the ensemble. They, their style, they had, I guess they all had things slightly different stylistically, but it kind of like epitomizes what jazz is about, like the whole thing, the swing thing, the bebop thing. A lot of it's all about. And actually, what I'm doing is slightly different because these guys were strictly. Me, I like to play pulse. I don't think about playing the triplet so much. I like to play more quarter notes.
Yeah.
Almost like dancing. But those guys, they kind of like that influenced me. That really introduced me to the music. And yes, this styles. Max Roach, of course, is a scholar when you talk about the drums because the way that he solos and some of the things that he's like very musical, like real melodic. Just had phrases. Like I had this. He had, as you know, he had this thing, the drum also waltzes. Which which was like something interesting at that time because nobody had. I don't think there was any record dating back that far where somebody did like a whole record of almost just compositions by drums. No accompaniment from any instrument, which was a unique thing. So Max, his thing, he always wanted you to hear the song and what he was playing. And that's what I really love about it. I still admire that. He's got little licks that he does some things that you never get away from, like, those little things. It's like, you can never get that out of your playing. Once you hear Max Roach, that's always going to be part of your vocabulary. You just find other ways to play them,
Yeah.
And Art Blakey, the same with that press roll. When you hear that roll, it's like, sometimes you just shh, and then cut off in the sound and just, it's like, oh.
Yeah.
Man.
What I noticed I love about Art Blakey is his hi-hat is like, it's like almost hypnotic the way it falls on it's so consistent and
it's so, it's like,
Yeah.
And the thing is, Art Blakey, he's like, I come from that school too where the hi-hat, this is a vacuum. So it's like you should have opened your hi-hat. I remember playing a gig at Ortlieb's and Ralph Peterson came in there and he opened my hi-hat while I'm playing. I'm like, what are you doing, man? He says, it's a vacuum in there. It's a sound when the air goes through there.
Yeah.
And he's right. And I see guys play, if you play with your hi-hat, it's a completely different thing to play like that or to play like this.
Yeah.
So that air just produces a different sound. And Art Blakey was consistent with that. It's, hi-hats where, Art Blakey all day.
Yeah. You're right. When you play the hi-hat like that, it cuts.
I'm like, it should be open. If you open, you get a certain sound. It's a vacuum.
Some of my students, I always got to remind them of that because they'll play their hi-hat. I can't hear it.
Exactly, because they're playing.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.